Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be continuing on with progress on the layout. And in today's video we're going to be concentrating on the area that you can see just in front of you. So what this video is going to involve is basically detailing up that area just over there. I've still got backscenes to add with the weather getting better. That's something I can soon get started on, so I'm hoping that's something we can do in this video, as well as also adding detail over on that area, and also on this side detailing up the bare bits of baseboard as well, such as over there for example. Now one thing I do want to add, just along here, is a row of retaining walls going all the way along, down there, by the other side of the station. Now as some of you are probably thinking, it looks very tight over on that side on the baseboard, and as you can see, it is quite tight really. In fact there isn't really any room, to be honest, for putting retaining walls on. Well, not when it gets around to that side anyway. When it meets the track, as you can see, there's not really much baseboard there. However, I have got a plan that will hopefully fix that. And the plan I've got in mind is using these bits of wood that I found. I've not had to go to and buy these, we've already had them, and my plan is using this one for example, is to either glue them or fix them in place somehow, possibly using staples or even just some strong glue should do the trick, and fixing those to the end of the baseboard like this. That should allow me to fit on retaining walls. Right, so this is what I've been doing. I've been using U-Hoo to glue on those bits of wood on the ends of the baseboard, and then to hold them in place while the glue dries, I've used those clamps that you can see there. Although, that bit of wood there on the end, that I had to cut to size for it to fit, that has not needed any clamps for that, because that was quite a tight fit, which is good. So I'm just waiting for the glue to set really, before then I can release the clamps and then move on to the other side of the layout. And then, once I can start onto this area here, I will do the same thing. And I have checked, and based on the length of the pieces I should have enough to do the whole area. And what I am thinking of doing is taking it up right all the way up to at least as far as the signal box, all the way along the back there, rather than just having one half with retaining walls and one half with nothing there. I think that would look right. So I've done the other side now. I had to cut this one piece all along here, so this would fit into place, because that then runs all the way up to, it just runs a bit past the signal box. That's about where I wanted to take the retaining walls up to, so putting that bit of wood there will allow me to fit them on. So I had more than enough wood to do all of that in the end, which is good. The only thing I will say though is that there is a bit of a gap, well, quite a bit of a gap actually, along that one there, and that is because, if I just show it you, that's the reason that bit of baseboard is a little bit shorter than the other one. That's the reason. So that gap is going to get filled in with some sealant or filler or something or other. But apart from that though, that is now done. So that will allow me to fit on the retaining walls. Okay, so what I've done is I've filled in the worst of the gaps. I'm sure that little bit of a gap there isn't going to hurt, because I am going to be painting over those bare bits of baseboard anyway, I think. But the worst of the gaps have been filled in. I've just used some no more nails for that, which has done a pretty good job of that. And that's just so that if I wanted to add something like ballast, something like that, which I will be adding there hopefully, then if I was going to add that, it would just fall through the gap that's there. So that's why I filled that in. I have gone and painted those bare baseboard parts just over there, over on that side. Nothing special, I've just used a acrylic burnt umber paint. I probably really should go over all of it with a second coat, but I've decided I'm not going to do that, and that's just because I have had to paint around some of the detail parts in certain areas. So I've decided not to do that. This is only really to stop any bare baseboard showing through any detail I decide to put down, but it is going to be covered over anyway. So I don't think it's going to matter too much. Okay, so a few days later, we have the retaining walls. Now, they don't come cheap, I will be honest. I've gone for the cheapest that I could get hold of, basically, if that makes sense. And what we have here are 10 packs of scale model scenery, blue brick railway arches, based on the measurements of the length of each of these walls. I figured it would, well, based on the measurements that I took from the length of these, because these are the 3-pack ones, I'd need at least 10 of these. These weren't the ones I was going to go for originally, but they do look quite nice, although these are the ones that actually come with brick paper. Right peeps, we have the first of the retaining wall packs now finished. And with this one it was very much a case of I got better as I went along with it, being as it was the first one that I made. Obviously there's a lot more care and time that goes into making these, but I don't want to rush them because that's the last thing I want to do with them. Just take your time with them. But you know, once you've got the hang of it, You know, they certainly are quite fun to build. And the detail on these, I think, actually doesn't look half bad, especially with the weathering on them. I will add some foliage growing in places, certainly, and I'm also looking at adding graffiti, but I would have to be careful of that because all this brickwork is paper, and there are a couple of imperfections here and there, but some of them could be covered up. But then, regardless, it doesn't really have to be perfect anyway. A few days later, I have all 10 of these brick arches completed. This took me 3 days to complete these. Then after that I did take a break from doing any sort of modelling whatsoever because it was the Seven Valleys Spring Steam Gala, which was great fun. So now I can get back to fitting these walls in that place now. What I have done is there are a couple of imperfections here and there, some of them can be covered up, but at the end of the day really these don't have to be perfect. But I will be looking forward to getting these into place. I may have to modify one or two of them as well possibly, I think. But we will see how it goes. Now I have had a worry about the brick paper on the arches because I'm just worried about slugs and snails getting in and chewing at it. Because it's something that has been happening. So, because something I have already done is I've actually gone around the layouts and I've put a line of copper tape around it, just to act as a deterrent to stop them getting on the layout. But one area I did not do that was just behind there. So off screen I've gone along and done all along that area using that copper tape to stop them getting onto the walls and chewing away at the brick paper. So all of these brick arches are now in place. There are some gaps in places, especially there where I've moved that wall over a little bit, but gaps like that are going to get filled in with foliage anyway, so it's not really going to be a problem. At least 2 of these walls also had to be cut to size in order to fit in, but regardless though, I personally think that is now looking fantastic with all those walls going along there now, because now that actually has got some detail there instead of just looking at just an end of a baseboard with that metal sheets in the background from the shed. So now that area along the back there has actually got something nice to look at. Still got a back scene to add all along there. And there is also that post in the middle there that there's not really a lot that I can do about that, to be honest. I might be able to stick something on the front of it though, like cutting a back scene to size or something, and then gluing something on the front of that. But for the most part, not really a lot that can be done about that. I can't tack that out for obvious reasons, or even rip a chunk out of it. But I think that area now, with all the retaining walls, is looking pretty good. I think that looks fantastic. I am still going to add foliage and even some graffiti. I'm not going to go too crazy with the graffiti, just a few bits of it. And also, the bits that I've painted on the baseboards, they need detailing. It's probably just going to be some ballast, to be honest, and weathered, but we'll see. I can also add some foliage along the bottom there as well. And what I've used for this is the glue gun. So I've not used anything too fancy to glue them on, but the glue gun is just strong enough to hold them in place. Right, so what I've gone and done then is I've gone along and I've filled in all the gaps, and most of them have been filled in using natural dried moss, which I think looks very effective. But that gap over there by that wall hasn't been filled in using natural dried moss. I've used clump foliage for that from Woodland Scenics, just to add a bit more variation. I do plan to add some of that foliage as well in a couple of places on these walls as well. And then what I've also gone and done is I've added some graffiti to these brick arches. I've not gone too crazy with this though, I've just gone and done it in just a few areas, to be honest. These are the Scalmore scenery ones. I was tempted to go out and buy the ones from Railtech, but I've decided to save money and just use what I had lying around. But I do quite like these ones from Scale Model Scenery, and I just love that they are nicknames of locomotives or even wheel arrangements. So just for example, over there you've got Cocoa and Peak, and then on this one just over here is Western. And what I've done with that one is I've gone and applied that in between those two walls there, just to try and stop it from looking uniform. And then down on this end we have Dog Box, and this bit of graffiti just here, which I'm not too sure, to be honest, what that says, because I can't really make out that one. But you know, it does add a nice bit of detail somehow. Not that I personally like graffiti in real life, because I don't, because it's vandalism. But it's strange though, on a model railway it seems to add some more detail. Okay, so what I've been doing then is I've been gluing in that clump foliage all along these walls, and I am quite pleased with how this is looking. But I have tried to make it so that it's not too uniform, so I've tried to add some variation with it. So in some places there's more of it growing than there is others. We've also got a first bit of snail stroke slug damage. Yeah, there were a couple of areas where unfortunately one got in and decided to chew at the paper, but some weathering has helped to try and disguise that. a bit. That part there though, all on that pillar there, that was actually the worst of it, so some foliage came in handy for that and covered that up. But regardless though, in spite of that, I am quite pleased with how that's looking. Something else I have also done is that wall there, running all the way down alongside up to that wall, that all came out and it was re-glued back into place, so it's now level with the rest of the retaining walls. Mostly, as you can see there. I mean, obviously that other one does stick out slightly more than the other, but I don't think it's too notable. Not like it was before, where it just wasn't level altogether. Because as you know, there was a big gap that I filled in using this natural dried moss, which you will have seen that in the video. In the end I decided I couldn't live with it like that, so those walls came out. They've only been glued in place with a glue gun, so it was easy to remove the walls and then get them repositioned. So I just think now it just looks better, I think. So whilst I'm waiting for some bits to arrive in the post to do some more detail work on the layout, I'm now going to turn our attention to fitting back scenes, which is something that's been on the to-do list for a while, and so we're going to be making a start on that. We've just been out to B&Q and bought this 3mm hardboard sheet. We've only got one at the moment because we're going to see how we're going to get on with this one. Then obviously we'll be able to get more of them and fit more back scenes up. And the back scenes I'm going to be using are these ones from ID Backscenes. I've had a couple of these which I had given to me a couple of Christmases ago, and because I already have them, I'm going to be using what I have, so that will save a bit of money rather than going out and buying others. And I think that they should still look pretty nice on the layout once they're up.
Getting how to put this right now. Don't press down too hard.
Right, so having cut the cardboard into two pieces, this is one of them. This one is going to go on the back, where the castle ruin is, the static caravan park and that landscaping is. I don't take any credit for that, that was my dad that did that. But what we have done now is, to fit it onto the back, we've glued on these magnets. That's been glued on just using PVA. The red canister for that is just at the back there. That should be strong enough to hold the magnets in place, and we're doing this because, well, it is a metal garage after all, so why not? The magnets are quite strong because we've already tested them on the metal wall of the garage, and they're strong enough to stick on there, so they should be strong enough to hold this up as well. Right folks, so off camera we did do an experiment, fixing that onto the wall. It stuck on fairly well, but it also had the tendency to be sliding down. So to add some further strength, we've gone and glued some more magnets on. So hopefully that should hold it in place more, so it shouldn't slide down or anything. And this time to glue the other magnets on, I've just gone and used some U-Hoo for them. So this is where we're up to with the back scene. So to fit on this one board, there's actually two back scenes glued onto here. One of the other ones I had from the one tube had to be cut off to fit onto the remaining part of the hardboard to prevent any wastage of that. But I've still got another back scene to use, and obviously there's still another sheet of this hardboard that we got, because it was one sheet cut into two pieces. And I think we just need another piece of that really to get. We might have to buy another backscene. I've got another tube of them upstairs. May have to get another one, but we'll just see how it goes. But how this has all been fixed onto the hardboard, it's just been using a mix of sellotape in certain areas where it just wasn't stuck down. We used glue for that. That's the method that we chose, and it seems to have worked quite well. Not saying that's necessarily what you should do, but there we go. And it's come out alright. It's already looking better than the back scenes that were on the previous layout. Obviously all this bit on the bottom here isn't fixed onto anything, but it doesn't matter really, because you're not really going to see that. That's only there because, I mean, we could cut that off, but not on this board, because it's to do with the castle ruin basically, on the landscaping over in that one corner of the layout. So in order for the back scene to look right there, that's why we've left this back scene looking like this, with no hardboard or anything under this part of the back scene, if you get my drift. Well folks, that is the first back scene up on the new layout, and I have to say I'm really pleased with that. I think that looks amazing there, especially with the castle ruin there, with that back scene in the background, not to mention just how well it seems to blend in with the static caravan park over there, and also that bit of landscaping over there with the trees. I just think it looks fantastic. It's going to be nice to have that in the background, not just have the metal walling of the shed in the background, so you got a nice back scene to look at. So the following day from this, we've got more back scenes to start on, to do the rest of them, to do all of that area over there in the back, to get that done. But I'm not going to be doing any montage of that in this video, because you've already seen the one back scene being done on screen. It will be the same thing that we do for the others, so no point in showing all the others. So sometime later, all the back scenes have been fitted to this side of the layout. In the end we did have to go out and buy another piece of hardboard. I cannot remember the dimensions off the top of my head, so I do apologise for that, but I know that they are 6 foot long. They're basically the longest ones that they do, stacked up on the shelves. Anyone who goes to B&Q and you've seen the hardboard there, you'll know what I mean. I know they're 610mm, but I just can't remember the rest of the dimensions, so I do apologise for that. But like I say, of the smaller pieces they do, this is the largest one that they do. Also, I did have to go out and buy another tube of back scenes as well to complete it. If you're interested, well, you probably know what they are already from what you saw earlier, but they are the ID back scenes ones. And all these are the Village Pack A ones. Now I'm not entirely sure if this would be entirely appropriate for a station scene like this. I mean, I had considered something like maybe a town or a city, but from what you can get that's available, none of them really took my fancy, so I went with these ones. I mean, I already had a couple of tubes of these lying around anyway, so that saved some money. But you know, I quite like these ones. So, yeah, I like them, so that's it. And also, adding back scenes, it really does add a lot more realism to the layout, and you just add so much more life to it as well. Now, this area over here, now, I know you can see the landscaping on that side doesn't quite match up on that side, as you can see. Not something I noticed until I actually went and fitted the back scene on there, onto here, in the layout. For some reason when applying it I never really seemed to realise that before. But it doesn't really bother me too much though otherwise, but I am thinking of adding something there in the middle of those two back scenes to try and disguise that a bit. We'll see. Also, the magnets that are holding these in place, they're working perfectly fine. They are strong magnets, I should point out. Some of these back scenes have been up more so than others. I mean, these ones along here, they were only literally fitted the day before I'm filming this clip. All the others have been up for longer than those ones, and I've not had any issues with the magnets at all. And I've not had any issues with the glue holding those in place either. So I think I can call that a success, I think. Something else that's been going on the layout, whilst I've been doing the back scenes, I've also been adding other bits of detail onto the layout. More cable trunking has appeared on the layout. These are the Scamble scenery kits, and I bought another pack of these. I've used a whole pack to add more of this on the layout, just because I think it's a really good bit of detail to add. So I've extended the amount of cable trunking that runs along this side of the layout, as you can see. And when you get it painted up using the Woodland Scenics concrete paint, it really does look nice. And also I just can't resist having the lids taken off some of them, which I think looks pretty neat, especially when you can see the cable detail in there, which is just paper, but even so when you look at it, I think it looks good. And also I have got some guys that I can just stick around there, so it looks like they're actually working on these areas. So that'll add some more interest to scenes like this. Also I've added some more I've added cable trunking over there. There wasn't any on that side before, there is now. I've also extended the cable trunking on this side of the layout as well. Before it only ran to here, so now I've added it so it runs all the way along to there. And also I have actually extended the cable trunking at that T-junction there. So that's what else has been going on. And also I do need to talk about these relay boxes. These are from Goodwood Scenics, and these have the doors open on them, and you can see all the detail inside there. And the detail that is in there, I think just looks absolutely fantastic. That certainly has more detail and interest to scenes such as this. And again, also because I have got some guys as well, I actually can stick one by the doors to make it look like they're actually working inside them. And then down along here, on the other end, is another Goodwood Scenics relay box with the doors open. And I think that they look fantastic, so I can highly recommend those. Now, the thing we need to do now is to get detailing the rest of the area. Instead of just leaving that brown paint there, that needs to be covered over. Now, the question is, what to do? Do I just go for ballast and then weather it? Or do I use, well, do we go for a ballast like in a grey colour and then use track weathering paint to get the paint over it to make it look dirty? Or do I go using some of that brown ballast you can get? Or do I not add ballast and do add something like soil or earth? I don't know. That's something to think about. So I was wondering about that. I'm now going to turn my attention back to the static caravan park, which you've seen my progress on this in a previous video when you saw me create it. Now I'm now at the point where I'm going to call it finished, because I have actually added some more detail to this area. I did consider filming it, but then I decided not to, because what I've added here I just didn't think it was really worth filming me putting it on, if that makes any sense. So what have we done? Well, firstly, trees have now appeared. Now I was always planning to put trees on this area, but I was waiting until the backscenes were fitted. I didn't want to fit any trees until I fitted the backscenes, just because. The trees I've fitted are from rail stuff. I've already had several of these fitted on the layout already, as you all know. And I bought these last year from the Alsager Model Railway exhibition, which they had a show offer on them for £29 for a box. And so I thought, I can make use of these. And I think they're nothing short of fantastic. I mean, they really are very realistic looking. And I just love how they just blend into the area with the back scenes fitted so well. They just fit them so well. I can't really think of any other way to describe that. They just fit the back scenes perfectly. Some wildlife has also appeared on the static caravan park. On one of the lampposts we have a pigeon. I know the camera's a little bit out of focus at the minute. There you go, it's looking a little bit better. I don't know why, just for close-ups of things like this, it's for some reason not the best. But we have a pigeon on there. And also, some other wildlife we have are rabbits, which are made by Scale 3D. I've painted them in a light brown colour. I mean, I could have tried to put in maybe a little bit more colour onto them, try and make them a bit more realistic looking, as you see rabbits in real life, but given how small they are, I wasn't going to try and attempt that, so I've just gone and painted them all in one colour. I haven't bothered painting the eyes or anything like that. And I've actually dotted some around in various different places. And what I actually did was, I went online and did some research showing families of rabbits. And I used the pictures for inspiration, where to put them and how I wanted them to look when I placed them on the layout. I actually think they've come out pretty good. Running just along here, as you can see, where I've extended the cable trunk, and you can see patches where the bare baseboard is showing through. So obviously I'm going to be putting ballast there, and so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make it so that it blends in with the rest of the ballast in this area. Right, so this is what I'm up to with the ballasting on that area. I've also done that little area over there. Very nearly forgot about that, so that's something I did off camera. And also, down here, that area there, has also had some ballast. Now, I was going to paint that ballast so that it blends and matches with the rest of the ballast that you can see. I've painted using the Geoscenics track grime. That makes it look like it's weathered. But I don't know, I'm actually quite liking this ballast as it is and not weathered. because it does look like the new fresh ballast has been put there, which you will see that out there in real life. You will see areas that do get new ballast put on top of existing ballast that's been there for a long time and gotten dirty. And the new ballast they put there is clean. Right, so now I'm going to turn my attention back to this area here. It's all been painted and ready for detailing. Now these areas on both ends of this part of the layout are going to get some detailing on here. I have been thinking about what to put there. I was thinking of either adding something like arid earth or soil, or even getting ballast and weathering the track, well, weathering the ballast I should say rather, to make it look like it's dirty, or even just using brown ballast. So I've thought about it and I've decided I'm just going to go with the brown ballast, if I'm honest. Right, so this is the stuff that I've been using. This is one of Hatton's Constructor products, and this is the fine iron ore for wagon loads. This is 400 grams I got here. Now, this is something that I've had now for a number of years at least. I can't remember when I went and bought this stuff, but it's not something I've used very much of. I know I have used it on 1 or 2 wagons and that's it. I've not really used it really. It's just been sat in one corner on the workshop, not really getting any use out of it. So, I mean, I was going to use some of that brown ballast you can get from Woodland Scenics, but this is the only stuff that I got. Ignoring that it's just in a resealable bag, this is the Woodland Scenic stuff. Trust me, I just don't have that bag anymore because I threw that away, so I've got quite a number of ballast loads I have in these bags. But this stuff that I've got here, which is this brown ballast, I can't remember what this stuff actually is called, but this is the stuff that I was going to use originally, but as you can see, the lumps are a bit big. And to be honest, I thought that it might look a bit out of scale, seeing these lumps of ballast the size that they are. So I decided not to use that, and instead I saw this stuff. I remembered I had it, and I decided to use this instead, and I've managed to use it for, I had enough to do all of that area that I wanted to do. And well, that's how much of the stuff I've now got left of it. So it has now been put to some good use at last. I have managed to use quite a bit of this, and so now I'm just letting the glue dry before I go in and add any other bits and details, which I shall add some other bits of details here and there, but before I go in and do that I've got to let the glue dry first. All along this part though, I have not shown that being done on screen, and I did that, well, just because I decided not to really. And obviously there, as you can see, I'm putting on the glue. Some of that has gone onto that wall, but no worry though, because hopefully that should dry off. But then regardless, once I've put the waiting room back on the platform just there, because I have been repairing that, then that really there isn't going to be noticeable. But I'm quite pleased with it. So it's really starting to come together now. Right, so I'm now going to turn my attention to that beam in the middle there. In order to make that a bit more nicer, I'm thinking of covering over that part, at least in the middle just there. So an idea I got in mind is to cut out a piece of a back scene that I've got left and stick it on the front there, where the back scene is, and then lower down where those arches are. Well, I mean, I did try experimenting with one of the scrap bits, cutting it to fit onto that, but it just don't look right because it just sticks out a bit further than the others, so it doesn't quite look right. So I guess the option is perhaps maybe to cover it over with foliage or something, maybe paint it dark grey, or maybe even some brick paper or something to make it look like some other structures there. Well, I think that actually looks pretty good there. I know obviously that small strip just there, you know, where the trees are, it doesn't necessarily quite match up with the others, but it doesn't matter. As long as it's still just about level with the sky, that's fine by me. I actually did, that's not the original one I put up there, because before I put another one up, but it wasn't quite, well, the sky wasn't quite really lined up properly. So I decided to just cut another piece off. It's not too difficult to do, to be honest. But however, there is still that bit of post there, still exposed, which I do want to cover up to make that look a bit better. So the stuff that I'm going to use is this. This is a sheet of brick paper from Railway Scenics. This is the Blue Engineers Brick English Bond stuff. Now you can download these. Of course you do have to pay for it still. It is only £2.40, and then you can download it. So it's not a lot of money really. And also, again, like I say, you can download it and print them off yourself. The only thing that would worry me is if a slug or snow got in and decided to chew at it. I mean, I did consider the idea of laminating it, but it would be too shiny. But then I don't think it really matters anyway, because even if that did happen, I've still got that saved on a memory stick, that file. So I can just print off another one if needs be. Right, so that bit of blue brick paper is now in place and glued onto that post there. I have had to cut a couple of other strips off though to cover the sides, so it is more hidden, shall we say. I mean, there is an imperfection, particularly on that bit. You might just be able to see a bit of the white paper there showing through, but the waiting room's got to go back here, so that should hopefully hide that. So you probably won't really hardly notice it, or at all even, to be honest. So there is the waiting room, now back on the platform. Now, there's already a couple of things I've already done to this off camera. First thing is, if you can't already tell, if I raise the camera up a bit, I have moved the waiting room back a bit on the platform. That's because where it was positioned originally, it was very tight for anybody to be walking by it, in front of it, or even to get to the door to get inside it. So what I've done is I've actually just moved it back on the platform a bit. What I've actually done is I've actually removed the paving slabs just behind the waiting room to allow it to be pushed back a bit further on the platform, but that's not to worry because you're not really going to notice that anyway. So there we go. I have also had to re-glue that litter there on the platform by the waiting room because that decided to come out of place, as did the pigeon there, but not to worry. Quick thing as well, I noticed that the wires were hanging down because they decided to come away from the black tack inside there. Not really a great look, to be honest, because of how visible that was. So I've just taken care of that with some more black tack. So one thing I've just done is I've taken some of that Woodland Scenics fine leaf foliage. I've placed it in a couple of areas. As you can see there, you can see a bit of the glue that I've used there, which will dry off eventually, and that should dry clear. And you'll also notice that I have stuck some buddleia in the fine leaf foliage. That is stuff from Tasma products. I just took off the buddleia off the plant that you get on them and just stuck it into the fine leaf foliage. And then down the other end there's another one of those just there. So now I'm going to add some figures. So here we have a pack of Batman Civil Engineers figures, and then we have these other line side, track side worker figures also from Batman, which these ones I actually used on the previous layout. And so it'll be just nice to add them on the layout so it looks like they're working on something. They're doing work, they're maintaining the railway, etc. So the figures are now in place, and I think that actually makes for quite a nice scene, I think. 'Cause it looks like there that you've got some workers there doing work in that area, and at this point they've been there for just about a week, I think. Now for that area and the other area on the other side of the layout, I don't know if there's any other details I could add there. I have got a couple of ideas of details I could possibly add, such as perhaps maybe somewhere around there. I mean, there's just a couple of ideas floating around in my head, but one thing I do need to address though is the station. How are people going to get on the platforms as well as get off them? The only way that they could get off and on the platforms on this station is by train. I mean, they've got a footbridge so they can at least change platforms, but there's no way of them getting on and off the platforms other than a train. So I think that's something that really needs to be changed. And what I've got in mind is to have an overbridge or something or other just on that side there, going up to on top of the retaining wall just there, just by that footbridge. And then the plan is to potentially add some sort of buildings going along the back there in front of that back scene. But that's the plan anyway, and then that will allow people then to actually get on and off the platforms on the station, so that way they can get on and off it without just having to use trains to get on and off the platforms, if you know what I mean. So that will make it look a bit better, I think. And so this is what I've come up with. Now originally I was thinking of using the Metcalfe Industrial Overbridge kit, but then I thought instead of spending money on something, why not use what I have, whatever I've got. Now the footbridge on the platforms is actually made using two kits, and I had some spare bits left, and I thought, you know what, I could actually make something out of this, and this is what I've come up with. I suppose you could call this an overbridge, but I think it might be fair to call it more of an extension of the footbridge. But anyway, so this is what I've made. So obviously you have the sides of the footbridge, and I've used glazing as well, of course. There's a floor in there, and then with the roof, now the roof is a bit cut and shut, you could say, because it's made using pieces stuck together. I had one big piece just here that was spare, but I didn't have another larger piece to glue together, so I had to glue two other pieces together, which are actually the roofs from the platform part, the parts of the footbridge that have the stairs basically on the canopies, and so they're all glued together. And then Deluxe Materials white model light filler was employed to fill in the gaps, and then I went and repainted the roof. Basically what I've done with this is I've painted it to match the colour of the footbridge. So this is the colour of the footbridge, and there are a few figures in there, as you can see. The figures that I've added are nothing particularly fancy, but I just added them in there for extra detail. I am thinking of putting some lights in here. I am thinking again a Hornby mag light to stick under the roof, which I think that would be nice to have. It's what I use on my waiting room. The platform canopies and the footbridge use those for lighting, so I think I will get another mag light and fit it in here. Right, now I will be honest, at this point in the video it has actually been a month since I last did anything on the layout, and my attention has really been elsewhere, to be honest, and not really focused on the layout that much really, or at all. Now with the footbridge extension stroke overbridge almost finished, my plan is to have it going along the back there. Now on the back I am planning to add a building. In fact, actually I think I might add a row of lower leaf buildings on the top there, but I'm thinking of where that overbridge footbridge extension is going to go. I'm thinking of putting a building there, a station building preferably of some description, and this is what I'm going to use. This is a Batman Scenecraft post-war system built station. This is something I actually bought before this project on building this layout began. I actually acquired this sometime after the original layout was torn down, prior to the build of the new one. So I've had this sat in its box now for quite a while, so I think it's time to get it out. I was hoping I'd be able to use the whole building, but there is a problem. So that's roughly where I'm going to stick that building. The only thing is, as you can see, there is an overhang. It doesn't quite fit there properly. That overhang there just looks unrealistic. Now I don't really want to have to spend any money on buying another building, because this is the one that I want to use. So I do have an idea on how I'm going to get around this, and the plan I've got is I'm going to cut this building in half. So as you can see, I've got some blue masking tape on there, that's so I can try to get as clean as a cut as I possibly can. It does seem a shame on one hand to cut this building in half, but for what I want to do, there isn't really any other way around it really. But that would leave me with two halves of the kit, so I could always put the other half perhaps somewhere else on the layout, who knows. But I think really it ought to be a lower leaf building, so that's what I'm going to do. This is exactly the sort of station building that I wanted to have on the layout in the first place, and because I can't find a lower leaf one, it's got to be cut in half. Well folks, at this point in the video, it has actually been a while since I last did any progress on the layout. I know to you guys it's not going to come across like that, but trust me, it has been a while at this point. It has been at least, I'd say, a few weeks or so since I last did any progress on this layout. But you know, it is getting there at a pace. Especially the work I've been doing. I've just been taking it slowly really, rather than going at it hard. Now, what I'm focusing on at the moment is those brick arches there, retaining walls, if you want to call them that as well. I'm looking at adding buildings going across the top of there. I haven't decided yet if it's going to be going down the whole length of those walls or just on the one side. But the reason for that is because, well, I've got to have one of those station buildings going up there, the one that I cut in half. And I'm looking at adding other buildings as well. So they have got to be sat on something. So this is what we've come up with. I found a strip of perspex, not really getting any use of it, and so I'm going to be using that. Had to cut it in half so it would fit. I got my dad to help me with this. What we actually did was we used the soldering iron, or a soldering iron I should say, at the hottest temperature and just basically used that to cut through it. To start with I used a Dremel tool and then used the soldering iron. And of course this was measured up. So basically I drew where it needed to be cut. And then just basically drew a line down it and then cut it in half, and then my dad helped me with filing the edges so they're not sharp. Obviously I'm not going to be leaving them plain white like this, I will be getting them painted up. Now at this point I should also discuss the station building, which I've cut in two. Now I will be honest, I already thought I'd already filmed the part when I'm talking about this, but going back and looking at the footage that I have on the computer, I haven't. So yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I think when I cut this building in half, I think that was a month ago, and even then I didn't film cutting the building in half. But what I did was I used a Dremel tool. Do be sure if you're going to do this you wear eye protection and a mask, because, well, obviously you don't want bits flying into your eyes, and also you don't want to be inhaling the dust that comes off this, which is a lot because this is a building made of resin. There were some bits on this building that did break off and had to glue back on again, but overall I don't think the cutting in half of this has turned out too bad. I think, to be honest, I'm only going to use the one half. I don't think I really need to use the other half on the layout. I can't really see much point in using the other half. But then, if that's the case, I can just always box it up maybe perhaps use it in the future at some point, I don't know. Which half I'm going to use though, I'm leaning towards this half, because the other half that has the doors on it, if I just fix it back together like this, then obviously, bearing in mind, that building is going to be going at the back there, where that footbridge is. And there will be an overbridge going up to there, so passengers can get to the station building. And my way of thinking of it is that they walk through here, then that walks them into a high street or whatever, or a town. You get the idea. That's just my way so passengers can get on and off the platforms. Because at the moment the only way they can do that is by using the train. And I wanted to have it so that they don't need to just rely on the train to get on and off the platforms. And my idea of thinking is because this half has the doors, this side, then the doors will be locked at some point at night, so that means people can't get on and off the platforms. Because if I turned it the other way round and had it so that the side that has the doors and it goes up where the footbridge is, it then leaves this space all in here open so that youths can hang around inside there. And I'm not really a fan of that. To me, I would have thought that this end of the building, this side of the building, would go up where the footbridge is, just there, whilst the other half will be on the other side. You get the idea of how I'm trying to explain it. So yeah, I think this is the piece that I'm going to be using. Right, so off screen I've painted both of these strips grey, and I've just used some acrylic grey paint from Dalerone, nothing special. Had to give this a few coats, but I'm quite pleased with how it's looking. Although, to be honest, I don't think you're really hardly ever going to see it, to be honest. But there we go, I think it looks nicer now than just white. Now, to fix it in place up over there, I think I'm going to have to make some things for these pieces to stand on. Right peeps, so I've brought the footbridge in because I'm going to make a small modification to it. Now, when I do fit the overbridge, or extension, however you choose to call it, which is just here, I still need to finish this. I still need to get some lighting strip for it, which it's been sat in here now for ages, and it does need to get done. But the plan is anyway, with this overbridge, as I'm going to call it, it's going to be attached onto the footbridge on this side. This is because this is the side where the arches are going to be. Now, the only thing is, as you can see here, if I'm going to attach the overbridge, which will sit just there, you can see that it's not going to look right. Simply because, well, you can see the windows here and this part of the footbridge. If I'm going to put the overbridge on, this bit needs to be open, basically. So, in other words, this part here is going to have to be cut off. So I'm going to get the cutting disc Dremel tool out with my mini drill, and I'm going to use that to cut this piece out, and then that will allow me to fit that part on. And that'll fit on something like that. You have to excuse my fingers in the way, but that's going to give you some idea how it will look. Right, so here's how the footbridge is currently looking. Now, this piece here, the overbridge or footbridge extension, whichever, that's now glued in place. Now you have to excuse the boxes of Yoo-hoo underneath it because I have used those, and also I have been using, just over here, these scrap pieces from when I was building those arches, the retaining walls. So I was able to pack some underneath that, and that was just whilst the glue dried. And I have also used Yoo-hoo just to glue this onto the footbridge, and the glue should now be set. Did I have to glue it on a second time though, because when I glued it on the first time it didn't quite line up with the footbridge, so I had to re-glue it, but never mind, there we go. We'll make mistakes. You'll also notice quite a bit of filler there in the middle, because there was quite a big gap in between the overbridge and the main footbridge itself. Even when gluing them together, there is that gap there, so I had to get out the Deluxe Materials White Model Light filler and use that to fill in the gap, and then I'm just going to paint over that. Then also here we have the roof. You can see that piece of roof for that extension is there. It's been glued in place. Now the thing was, when I did paint it, it wasn't really the same shade of grey as the rest of the roof, so it did look a bit off. I mean, I was tempted to leave it because, let's be honest, nothing in real life is perfect. But then I decided afterwards, nah, I'm going to paint the rest of the roof, and so that's what I've done. And so it now more closely matches and blends in with the rest of the roof. And I actually do quite like it in this colour now. Also, when I first made the overbridge extension for the footbridge, in the middle I had these parts glued into the middle. These are just basically bits of soldering wire, and the reason I glued those into place just under the roof was to basically give it a bit more structure, because you only had the two side pieces and the floor. There wasn't really much else structure wise to it. But now that that's been glued onto the footbridge, I shouldn't really need these pieces now, especially given the rest of the footbridge doesn't have that. I thought it also maybe looked a little bit off as well. But like I say, it shouldn't really need those parts now that it's glued onto the footbridge, so I have removed them. So that's just explaining that. Okay, so I've just painted over that filler using Revol medium grey paint. I know the way I've done the filler is not spotless, but to be honest really, I don't think you're ever really going to see the inside of the footbridge anyway, so I'm not really worried about it. I have had to repaint the floor in there though, because previously when I applied the paint it was actually a darker shade of grey than the rest of the floor was. So I have gone and repainted that. So now I've just got to glue the figures back inside the footbridge. So the figures are now back in place in the footbridge, and I used a photograph I had of the inside of the interior of the footbridge to use as a reference for where I had to glue the figures. So that's looking really good now. I'm quite pleased with how that's turning out. I just need to get a lighting strip now to go in this part of the roof, so it will fit in on this part here, so it will blend in and look good with the rest of the footbridge, and then the roof can go back on, and then the footbridge is done. Well, so here was the footbridge on the station again. The roof's off it at the moment. Now, as you can see, there is a slight problem. Obviously the footbridge doesn't go up to the same height as the retaining wall, so as you can see at the moment, that overbridge there, or shall we say footbridge extension, goes straight into the wall, so nobody can actually, well, if I was to put a station building in front, they wouldn't be able to get there. Let's say around here, which is where it would go, they won't be able to get to it. Now, because I haven't yet fixed anything in place along the back of the walls yet, for any buildings to go on that, I suppose that's come in handy, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut out a chunk from that retaining wall. I've already marked that out, and then basically the plan is that buildings will basically end up sitting, if it's possible, I mean, because these walls have also now got bent backwards, as you can see a bit, so they're no longer straight in keeping with the others. I don't understand how and why that's happened. I'm presuming perhaps the heat's done that or something, I'm not sure. But the plan is that if I get it level enough with that, then I might be able, well, the people then will still be able to at least get to the other side of where there would be a town, and still be able to get there. So if I just drop that down lower, then obviously they'll be able to walk straight through that building. I mean, it might not necessarily be ideal, but The only thing is, I mean, I did try previously trying to lift this part here upwards so that way I could have buildings sat at the top just like this. The only thing is though, it didn't look right. So I'm going to do it this way, and I hope it works out. Right, so what we've done off camera is I have cut out a piece of that retaining wall just there. Now, the way I went and did that was I used a cutting disc and a little hacksaw. I mean, to cut it down here, I did try to use the cutting disc. I mean, it did work, but the cutting disc was wearing down, so I had to resort to using the hacksaw for that. But to cut along here, along the bottom, I went and replaced the cutting disc with a new one, and it was virtually almost like cutting a knife through butter. I had no issue with that. Then it was just a case of just cleaning up the cut, and then the footbridge has just gone back in place. What I have also done, if you can see it, the exposed bits of MDF I've covered as best as I can, just using some brick paper. I used one of the scrap bits of these arches that I had. Just cut off a bit of the brick paper, cut it into a couple of pieces and just glued it on the ends there. And then basically, when I do get buildings along here, here's the station building. If you imagine that going there, I don't think that looks too bad. Of course it will be sitting on something, and I might extend this bit in here, might get some plastic card and paint it to go into the building. We'll see yet. Also, that wall there, that needs to be fixed back into place properly. I still don't know why it's leaning backwards like that, to be brutally honest. I can only assume that maybe the heat or something has done that. But we will get that sorted. Hopefully, when I do come to fixing what I've planned to put at the back in place, that will keep those walls upright. I've decided to abandon the idea of using those bits of styrene because my original idea that I had just didn't really work out in the end. But there we go, it's just one of those things. But I think that's looking alright at the moment. It just needs its roof back on, which is something I'm going to do now because I do have a lighting strip to finish it off. Right, so here is the roof from the footbridge. Now, I'm going to be fitting in a lighting strip here, because then that will finish it off and that will have the whole of the footbridge lit up, including that overbridge part or the extension that I haven't made and fitted in place. So I'm going to be using one of these. This is a Hornby Maglite kit. Now, the ones I've been using already, which you've seen in previous videos, I've been using the Maglites for the Mark III coaches. Now, I couldn't get a Maglite for the Mark IIIs because everywhere I've looked they're sold out. So this is one that's meant for a 4 and 6 wheel coach, and even though it's going to be a different colour to these, because the colour of the Mark III Maglites, the lights are a warm white colour. That's not the case with the mag lighting for the 4 and 6 wheel coaches, but I have an idea of how I can make them white, because doing research on Google, you can make paint transparent either by adding water or using a glazing medium. I don't have a glazing medium, so I'm going to try watering it down to thin it. Whether it's going to work or not, I don't know. Right, so I'm just going to get the mag light out of the pack. So you have your magnet, and then you have your CR2032 battery, which is a button cell battery. When it decides it wants to come out, there we go. And of course you have your lighting strip, just here. If I can position it right up to the camera, there we go. And then what you get in here, you have your battery cell, your lighting strip and your circuit board thing. So, now what I need to do is to paint these parts here, where the lights are. I have watered down some white paint. I hope this works. There we go. I'm just going to use those paint pots just to hold that in place so it's nice and flat on the table. And whilst I'm here, I'm going to add a bit more black tack to this battery here on the roof so I can hold it in place a bit better, because it doesn't really hold in place all that well. I don't think I put enough black tack on there from the start, to be honest. But there we go. And I'll just use the black tack because that way, if I need to remove these, then I can take them out again easily without any hassle. I know some people might glue them in, but this is how I do it. Right, the paint's now dry, so it's time for the moment of truth. Is this going to work? Now, to fit the battery in, now on the battery cell, battery box, whatever you choose to call it, there's a plus sign, which you may or may not be able to see, but there is one on here. Now, you've got to fit the battery in this way up. Okay, that's now fitted. Then just take your magnet well, as you can see, I'll just get the paint pots to straighten these out so you guys can actually see this. I mean, I guess it's done something for these two lights on the end, sort of, but not the rest of them. It could be that maybe I haven't put enough paint on them. So I'll have to do this again, do maybe another coat or a couple, and then I'll come back to you. Right, okay. I think we've hit a bit of a snag with this. I have used, to start with, I was using this white paint that I've watered down. That didn't really seem to be working. So I took it off, then I went in and used a Posca paint pen, which I've just dropped on the floor. And even using this, it still doesn't change the colour of the lighting. I even went on top of that, using the white paint again. But if I turn the lights on, you can see that they are still this colour. If I bring in the roof with the LED strips already on here, these are the ones in the roof from the Mark III, or for the Mark IIIs I should say rather, you can compare the difference of the colour. Now at this point, to be honest, I think I'm out of ideas. I thought that this idea of watering down some paint to try and make it transparent would work and change the colour of the lighting, but that doesn't appear to be working out. So I think my only really other idea, I think at this point, is I'm just going to leave it as it is. I know it's not going to match with the rest of the lighting, but I couldn't get any lighting strips for the Mark III. I mean, when they do become available again, I could always replace it, I suppose, for one of those. But until then, I guess this will have to do. I suppose I could make it so it differs slightly from the footbridge, so perhaps I could use the excuse maybe when they built it they used different lighting. Perhaps maybe they didn't have the same lighting they used for the footbridge available and they used something else. I don't know. So I think I'm going to remove the paint off here, off these, and I'm going to fit it in anyway. Okay, so I've fitted the new lighting stripping, so now all of the footbridge has lighting. And so I just get the magnet and turn on the lights. You can see that that lights up quite nicely. Even though this lighting strip here is a different colour, I've decided actually I think I'm going to leave it like that. I mean, when the Mark III lighting strips become available again, as I say, I could always replace it if I wanted it to, but I might keep it as it is so that it's just adds a bit of variety, I suppose. Like I say, when they built the extension for the footbridge, or the overbridge as I'm calling it, perhaps they used whatever lighting they had available and they didn't have lighting available in the same colour, explaining why it looks different. I don't know. It's just a bit of modelling licensing, I suppose. But with the lighting now done, I'm now going to refit the roof back onto the footbridge. Right, I've done several takes at this now. It's been one thing or another. But here we have the roof back on the footbridge. Obviously I can't have the roof permanently fixed in place because I've got light strips that use batteries. So I need to take the roof off at some point whenever I need to change the batteries. I have got bits of black tack though, holding them in place, so that it's not too loose on the footbridge, if that makes sense. It really is looking pretty good now. I mean, it looked good before anyway, but especially now that I've got the overbridge, I think it really does look good. I mean, I know I probably should be calling that a footbridge extension, but the idea behind it was to make an overbridge. So I've just been calling it that. Now I know at the moment, because this wall here is not quite level with this one, as you can see there is a bit of a gap between the arch there and the overbridge. But I am going to get this so it's level with the other end. So when I do that, it then butts up nice and close up to the overbridge. Also, a quick update on the other arches. I mentioned earlier that they were leaning over. I've now sorted that. What I've done is I've got some bits of wood cut to size and I've placed that in between the walls and the back ceiling. You can't see them because I have placed them down quite low. At the moment I've black tacked them in place, but I have already done this with one of the other walls over this side. And considering that's been in place longer than I have done with the others, and the fact especially that when it's been in the hot weather we've had recently, it's still in place. I've had no problems with it. So all being well, I shouldn't have any more problems with those ones now. Now that I've sorted that problem. You can also see the ends of the you can see parts of paper there on the ends of the top of those arches from when I covered those bits on the ends. So I think I'll get some clump foliage or even natural dried moss to cover those up. Quick update, that wall is now sitting fairly level with the other one, so that's now butted the retaining wall up to the overbridge. And I've done like I've done with some other walls on here, just put a bit of wood between the wall and the back seam. That's now holding that firmly in place. Right, so this is my idea of what I've come up with to fit onto the back of my arches, my retaining walls, and getting buildings to sit on them. We have these angle pieces. These are made of card and they are fairly strong as well. Now originally I was going to use pieces of styrene cut into strips, painted, and what I was doing was I was actually fixing on bits of wood onto the back of the walls and then gluing the styrene pieces on top of them. However, that just wasn't really working out. I mean, it did work okay to start with until then the heat came along and, well, that basically put that idea right out of the window, because then of course with the heat the glue just wouldn't really set properly. So I decided to abandon that idea and come up with something else, and the idea now is to glue these onto the back of the walls, and then I'll just rest the buildings on top of them. So for example, if you imagine this piece going at the back of the wall, and at the top here, that's where the buildings will sit on. And so there are the angle pieces that I've glued onto the back of the walls. I just took some Yoo-hoo glue, nothing fancy, and I just brushed it on, and then I just stuck it onto the back. And also those pieces of wood that are holding up the walls in a few places are actually seem to be supporting it a bit as well. That one there I've put under there just to try and prop up those two pieces, because I had to use two pieces because I didn't have a piece long enough to go down all that one area. So that bit of wood there, that's just acting, sort of, trying to prop them up. I know that bit of wood is not necessarily flat and I will get that sorted, but it's just there as a temporary thing for the moment, just to try and hold them up until I can think of another way of how to do it. But otherwise, if I can get that to stay in place permanently, then it's not going to be an issue, because for example, if I put a building like this here, the other half of the station building, and prop it up something like that, you're never really going to notice that bit of wood at the back there anyway. Right, so that piece at the back of the retaining walls has actually been up now for, at this point when I'm filming this clip, it's been about a week or so, and it's still held firmly in place. It hasn't come out of place or anything. The only thing I have done though, something I've just done off camera, is to prop the walls up a bit more, just there, because they were leaning back. I have just cut a bit of wood to length, and I've actually placed that in between the wall and the back seam. I know it might seem a bit of a crude way of doing it, but when buildings, etc., whatever I choose to put there, when it goes there, that will obscure that pretty much. But the thing I do need to do now though is to get this painted to actually look like tarmac of some description. I'm thinking of just going for a grey colour, to be honest. Nothing too fancy. Also, in between those two parts there, because I had to use two pieces to go down all the way along that particular row, I've just used a bit of super glue to super glue those together. So what I've done is I've painted all of that angle piece grey. The paint I've used is nothing too special. The paint I've used is Dalerone Neutral Grey. And it does the job, to be honest. Again, it's nothing special particularly, but it'll do. It'll do for my needs. And you may or may not be able to notice, but what I've also done is I've actually cut out a piece of card, painted that grey, and I've actually glued it into place in between the footbridge and what's supposed to be the pavement, that angle piece, because there was a gap between both where the overbridge and the footbridge was, joining up to the wall. So a piece of card has gone in place to cover over that. So one or two bits of pieces I've been doing before I put the station building onto the scene over there by the station. First of all, I've put a station name board on the building. I know it's not exactly the same size as this piece that was already here. You can see it sticking out on either side of the station name board. But I just thought it would make a little bit of extra detail. But I might be able to paint over those other bits, maybe at a later date if I can find some green paint that matches the shade that's been used on the building. And the other thing I've done is I've made this sign. It's double-sided, just glued onto a couple of pieces of plastic card, and then for the post I've just taken some soldering wire, super glued it on, and then painted that. And that will go on either side of the station building. So that's where the station building will now go. I'm not planning to have that permanently fixed in place. My plan is to keep it so it's loosely in place, so that if I need to take it out, I can just take it out like so, and it's easier to be removed if I need to do that. And I think that looks alright there, actually. I quite like that. I quite like where it's placed. I know obviously placing it there it obscures some of the detail, such as those doors for example, but there isn't really a lot that I can do about that. I've also gone and added in the sign. I've chosen to place it on this side, as you can see. I mean, I could have placed it on the front of the building somewhere, but the thing was, I decided not to, because I thought it would be more easily seen placing it here. Because using my imagination, basically the idea is passengers walk from the station building, because over on the other side of the station building there is the main high street. So they'll walk through the station building and then they'll obviously walk across the overbridge on the footbridge there. Then they'll go on either side of the station platform where they need to be on, and they can also get off the same way as well. So because I have decided in my head that the main high street will be on the other side, even though you can't really see that, but you just have to use your imagination, that's the reason why I've done that, so that the station sign can be seen. It probably didn't really need to be double-sided, but somehow I just thought it would look better that way, and to give it a bit more detail. And also, should you be able to see it if any shots are going to be filmed at the station, depending on the angle perhaps, then yeah, why not? So here are all the buildings that I have that I used from the previous layout. These are all olive buildings. They won't all be going on to that section of the layout. Some of them will be. So I've got to decide which ones I'm going to put on and use. So what was the BT store is now a Woolworths. And all I've done with this, I've taken a Woolworths logo which I printed off the internet. I then shrunk it down to the size that would cover over the BT's logo. Then I glued that onto some plastic card, and then that's been Gorilla Tacked onto the building. And the reason I've used Gorilla Tack is if I need to remove the logo, I can remove it more easily. And I think that looks alright. Originally I wanted the text to be red, and the background to be grey, a very similar colour to the building here, which you did see on some stores, but I couldn't really do that easily, so this is how I've done it. But I think it looks alright. So I've added the Woolworths store next to the station building. Now I am using a bit of an imagination that there is still room in between where the building is and the wall, so that people can still walk about. Because my thinking is, as I've said before, the main high street would be on the other side of that station building. But on this side, I see no reason why there can't be a selection of buildings so people can still walk about on this side of the high street or town, whatever I choose I'm going to call it. And that there's a selection of shops that they can walk into and visit, basically, and spend the money or whatever. That's my way of thinking. Just have to use a bit of creative modelling licence, to be honest. So this is how the scene is currently looking, and in the end I was able to use most of the buildings that I had. I mean, I guess I could change some of them in the future if I wanted to, but I'm not planning to do that personally, to be honest. But for the buildings that I have used, I actually think that they look alright there on that scene. I'm quite pleased with them. And I think that makes for, I think, an alright looking scene. I mean, again, I can't have a road on there, or really any street lights, to be honest, because there's not really enough room to fit a road on there and have road vehicles, etc. and all that lark. But it still makes for a nice scene, I think. To be honest, I think, in my opinion anyway. But you know, I am working with the space that I've got. I mean, model railways, there are going to be some compromises, so not having a road up there is a compromise with the space that I've got. I mean, I guess I could squeeze street lights into them, but then I've only got to go and wire them up. The only thing I've had to do though is I've had to modify some of these buildings in a certain way. Some of them have been stuck on to the back scene using Gorilla Tack, because some of them were not really nice and straight and level. Some of them were looking a bit lopsided for some reason. So I've used some black tack by just sticking them on the back of the buildings and sticking them onto the back scene. And that works okay, but I can still take the buildings off though, if I need to remove them, so none of them are glued in place. This station building here I have risen up, because this was something my dad pointed out to me, and I later decided that, yeah, he was right. Is that, to be honest, as it was before, it just didn't look right, so I have risen the building up a bit. To do that, I have glued it onto some bits of polystyrene. But to prevent it from looking noticeable, what I've done is I've painted the bits on the inside of the middle of the building there in, shall we call it the walkway, I guess. They've been painted up with black paint, so you can't really see those. And then on the outsides of the building, I've just taken some clump foliage and covered those up, just to add a bit of extra detail. And the ones on the front that were visible, looking at it from a certain angle, I painted it grey, so you can't really see it. But then I'm going to be filming from the station on certain angles, so that you'll never be able to notice that anyway, to be honest. I also used a couple of other bits of foam on a couple of other buildings as well, here and there, again to also raise them up a bit. But again, you're never really going to notice that, to be honest. One thing I've literally just done off camera is I've made a slight adjustment to the model centre building there. I have risen that up a bit, just using Gorilla Tack. But you won't be able to notice that it has been risen. It is difficult to see and tell anyway, even if you look at it at a certain angle. And I have got that fairly straight, it's just that if it doesn't look quite straight, it's to do with the back scene, I think, really. But that's about as straight as I can get it, really. And I've also done the same thing with the Sweet Caroline shop, so that you can just about read the name on the shop there. I've yet to decide though if I'm going to add any buildings on the other side, just along here. And I possibly could do that, but the only thing is, as you can see, there's not enough room really to add for example, a strip of buildings going all the way down the whole length of the walls, because you just won't be able to fit them in, to be honest. But to be honest, even if I only have the buildings on the one side, I don't think that personally matters, really. I mean, that's just my personal view on it. I mean, it is after all my layout. I guess maybe in the future I could add some more here, for example, possibly up this end. But as you go down further along, you can see that there isn't really any room to add any. But one thing that I am looking at doing is perhaps maybe looking at getting something to put there to hide the fact that the back scene here is higher than this one. In other words, to disguise these two back scenes not quite matching up. In other words, this hill here not being level with the one that's here on this one. And obviously most people will probably just rip it out and maybe redo that, but I'm not doing that. So I think I'll probably put something like, I don't know, a pile on there, perhaps a chimney or something. I don't know, I'll work something out. And I think this part of the layout with the back scene and the buildings really does add to the scene. It really does make for a very nice scene, I think. Right, something I've done off screen is I've cut a couple of pieces of the back scene that I had left over and stuck them onto these beams. I had already done the front, cutting a piece off and sticking it on the front there, but to be honest I felt like either side of that post in the middle also had to have some back scene on it to make it look a bit better. And there's the other. And that does look a bit better. I think that is an improvement. Obviously I've not covered the whole of the post. I don't really see any point in covering the whole of it, but at least covering the sides and the front of it does make it look better and cover it up, so when you get certain shots of it you don't really see it. So I think that's been hidden fairly well. So some more fine foliage has now appeared over in this area. I've been using the light green stuff. And I've just been adding that in various places, just along there. And it does add a nice bit of detail. It adds a bit more colour as well to over on that side of the layout, I think. And I've added a couple of bits over by that signal box. And then after that I can add extra detail, as I have added a couple of bits of white buddleia there. And I think that looks alright. Quick update then on this scene. The angle pieces that I've used to glue onto the back of the walls to act as a pavement and a thing for the buildings to stand on here, well, although it was a good idea, when I walked into the shed only a day or so prior to filming this clip, I saw that the angle pieces were starting to come away from their attachment. They were basically just leaning forwards. They had basically come loose, and I think because the glue I was using to glue them on was only Yoo-hoo, I don't think that glue was really so suitable for them. Not something I didn't realise at the time. I think perhaps the reason for that is because of the weight of the buildings. That can possibly explain that. So what I have done now is I have refitted the angle pieces back in place. And what I've used to fit them back into the place is 2-part epoxy resin, which is the Gorilla Stuff, to be precise, that sets in 5 minutes. It meant that I did have to hold the angle piece in place when I was gluing them. Yeah, that for 5 minutes. It made my arms ache. But that glue should be stronger, I think. And so hopefully I've got no worries about the weight of the buildings causing them to come out of place. The angle pieces, that is, that they're sitting on. And so far, having been up for a day or so now, all seems to be well. I mean, occasionally that building over there does seem to go a little bit lopsided. I think I might have to tack that in place like I have done with some other buildings. But apart from that though, it's looking good. I have also drilled a hole there for that sign to fit into because it did break off a few times, so that should hopefully help to keep it in place. But also, interestingly, now that I have re-glued those angle pieces back into place, somehow it seems some of these buildings are a bit higher up than what they were, unless that's just me. And also, a couple of these pieces were actually risen up a bit using bits of foam. I think there's only 2 buildings now that are using that. That one there, the property building, and the sweet shop. But any others that had that have now had it removed because there was no need for that. And one other adjustment I have had to make is the pavement that I made that goes from the joins up to the pavement inside the overbridge there, inside that footbridge, going to the pavement along here. Basically I just used card for that, but originally the piece of card that I made wasn't really the same width as the footpath inside the footbridge there, so it was actually a little bit shorter, and also didn't really come out to the pavement here on this part of the high street, so it didn't really look right, to be honest. So that's something that I went back and corrected. I'm not sure if that was shown on camera when I first filmed it, but it's something that I definitely saw with my own eyes, and yeah, needless to say, I decided that that could be done better. So I just took a piece of card and actually worked out how wide it had to be. I only had to cut off a small strip on either side of it for it to fit perfectly, believe it or not, but that's what we did. Then I just cut it in half to the length that I wanted it to be, painted it in the same grey as I had done with the angle pieces to represent a pavement, and then I just glued it into place, and it does look better than what I did before. It might not be so noticeable, you'll have to excuse the cam work here being a little bit shoddy, but I am doing my best. But as you can see, there's that piece that now comes out onto the pavement. So I'm going to treat that as a sort of ramp, I think, to be honest. Which, really, that's what that should have been there before, really. But those adjustments aside that I've made, I think I'm going to call that area done, mostly. I mean, I guess there are other bits of detail I could potentially add to that, but that's something to be added at a later date. Obviously I can't add a road or any road vehicles there because there's no room for that. So that's very much a compromise. There are going to be compromises with model railways, of course there are, and in this case I'm very much working to the space that I have. But I have already explained that earlier in the video for my idea on this particular scene here, so it's just a case of using artistic modelling licence, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, I guess... So at this point in the video, I'm going to call the scenic part done for this video, and I'll be continuing in another video and then move on to something else. So I'm going to talk about some new arrivals, some of which that I've had for a few months or so now, others are quite new at the time of filming the video. So firstly then, I would like to talk about some arrivals that I've had for a few months or so now, because this video has been filmed over a course of a few months. So I'm going to start off with then the Akira scale cauldron wagons. These are in the Stockton and Darlington Railway livery that you can buy from Locomotion Models. And these are something that I've had for, like I say, a few months now. And I bought these specifically to go with Locomotion. It's just nice to have some more suitable and correct rolling stock to go with a loco. And the cauldron wagons are great little models. I particularly like the magnetic chain couplings that they have. I have only 6 of them so far. Whilst it's a nice rake as it is, I am tempted to buy 1 or even 2 more packs at some point to make a longer rake. But it's just nice to have something more appropriate to go with the loco. The other new arrival that I've had now for a good few months, and this is something you guys will already seen, because at the beginning of the video this item does feature, and at the time when I was filming those shots, that's when this item was brand new. So that probably gives you an idea that just how long this has been filmed. This definitely wasn't filmed in the space of a single month. But what we have is a Batman Class 158. This is the new tooling, not the older tooling. And at the time I bought this from the model centre when they had it on offer for 179 quid. And this is a model that does not retail for that price when it's brand new. It goes for over the 200 quid price tag. In fact, it possibly might even be to the 300 price mark. I don't think they're available now for this price, but for a brand new model, this wasn't pre-owned. A brand new tooling Batman 158 for 179 quid. I thought that was a bargain. It's not something that I really thought about at the time when Batman first released it, but for that price, and when I started thinking about it and what I could possibly do with it, I decided to go for it. And I just thought it would be nice to have. It would be nice to have the express branding on this livery of the 158 running on the layout. We're in it with the regional railways and central trains liveries I got. So now I'm going to move on to the more recent new arrivals, the most newest that I've got. And the first of those to show you is these HAA wagons. These are in the coal sector livery. Well, I say the coal sector livery. They have the yellow cradles and the rail freight coal sector logos on the sides. And there's 9 of these wagons here. Now I already have a rake of HAAs which are in the, they have the red cradles, they're supposed to be the rail freight ones. I have at least 15 of those. You guys have seen them a number of times on the channel. And you know, it was a rake I was quite happy with. But recently, I just felt like that I wanted to extend that rake and make a longer train. And instead of going for wagons in the same livery, I decided to get some different ones. Because as well as seeing rakes in the same livery, you could also see rakes of wagons and even rakes of coaches in different liveries, and that's something you can still see today actually. And I just thought that that would add a bit more interest to the rake, having some different livery wagons in there. And so this will now bring the rake up from 15 up to 24. Here's another one of the most latest arrivals to join the collection. This is a Batman dancehall brake van in South Eastern and Chatham Railway livery. These have been out for something like a year or so now. I can't remember exactly when they first come out, but when they did first come out they were retailed for 49 quid. I personally wasn't going to pay that much money out for one of these, so I decided to wait for a price drop to see if there was going to be one. I got this from Kerno Model Rail Centre for 22 quid. You can also get them from the Model Centre for that price as well. So for that price I decided to get one. That's what persuaded me to buy one. And I think it is a very nice model. So moving away from items of rolling stock, here's a loco. This is one of the newest locos that I've got that's joined the fleet. This is the latest release from Rapido, which is of course the South Eastern and Chatham Railway 01, which I have already done a review on this model. And I think this is a stunning model, as I've said before. I've got no issues with this model at all. The only thing that I had with this model was the foreplate came off, as did one of the vacuum pipes, which I had to glue those back on again. But apart from that though, no other issues otherwise. I think this really is a fabulous looking model of a lovely locomotive in real life. And it's just nice to have this model, because when they first announced it I was interested in getting one of these. I was looking forward to it. I already owned several other South Eastern and Chatham Railway locos, so this was a must-have. And so now that it's here, I can say it's definitely worth the money, and it was certainly worth waiting for. I do think it's probably one of the best models that Rapido have produced yet, I think. A couple more of the recent acquisitions that have arrived are a pair of Class 60s. We have the Cavalax model, which I have had for longer than the other. In this case, the one you can see here is 60081 Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Whilst the other one is of course the Akira scale offering, 60007 in load haul livery. Personally I think they're both fantastic models and I would recommend either one of them. Doesn't matter which one you go for, they're both great models. Here we have another recent new arrival, and this is the Akira Scale Class 89 Badger. This is the Intercity Swallow livery, which depicts the loco in its original condition when it was in this livery. And when this was first announced I had this pre-ordered pretty much straight away, because this is a model of a loco that's never been done in RTR before, and it was something that I had wanted to see. And this is something that I personally wanted to own in model form as well. So when it was first announced I had it pre-ordered basically within a heartbeat. And it really is a beautiful bit of kit. There's already a full review on this on my channel, so I don't need to spend long periods of time talking about all the bits and pieces on the model. But the detail on this model is just amazing. Akira Scale have really well and truly knocked it out of the park with this release, I think, with this model. So that's brought us to the end of this video. Obviously, more progress on the layout will be continued in the next videos of the new layout. But for now, I'm going to call the progress that we've done in this video done. I'm going to leave it at that for that particular area. And we'll crack on with the layout, of course, in the next video. But to end out the video, I'm going to do what I usually have been doing in these videos, and we're going to end it with a running session with various different trains running. So to close out the video, I'm going to say thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like what you see, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It will not cost you anything. Hit the like button. Feel free to post a comment, and feel free to also check out all my other videos I've got on the channel. But until next time, we'll see you again soon. Over and out.